Together, growing in faith, changing communities.
Together, growing in faith, changing communities. My dear brothers and sisters, I would like us to reflect on the book of Numbers, chapter 21, from verse 4 to verse 9. In those days, from Mount Hor, the Hebrews set out by the way to the Red Sea to go around the land of Edom, and the people became impatient on the way. Let us unpack that story. How did they end up in Egypt? If you know the story very well, there's something that I think is relevant to all of us. We know that the Hebrews, or the people of Israel, ended up in Egypt because of the famine. But we also know what had happened, that one day Pharaoh has a dream. And when Pharaoh has a dream, he dreams of 7 large cows and 7 thin cows. And he sees the thin cows eating the large cows. And he also dreams of the 7 milli, and one is big, one is small. And the small one eats of the bigger one. And then he does not understand. And so he asked the wise men and women of the country, and none of them proved to be wise to interpret the dream. And eventually one of them, or one of the servants, says, there is a man in prison, his name is Joseph. One of his greatest dreams is to interpret dreams. That is his greatest gift. And so Joseph is brought forward, and he goes into the palace, and Pharaoh says to him, I had a dream, but I need you to tell me the dream, and I need you to narrate to me its interpretation. And so Joseph gave Pharaoh the dream. This is what you dreamt of, my Lord, and this is the interpretation of the dream. As you know the story very well, that the 7 years are 7 years of plenty, and the 7 years, the other 7 years are other 7 years where we want, and it is the 7 years of famine. And so out of that interpretation, Pharaoh therefore took Joseph out of prison, and he made him in charge of the treasury. Now there are a few things that I think are important there. You know very well how Joseph ended up in Egypt. He was sold by his own brothers. They left him thinking that he's dead. His own father was convinced that his son had died. There are things that I see Joseph teaching us by his way of life. The first one, when life throws a lemon at you, what do you do? When it throws a brick, what do? You build a house. You turn the stumbling block into a building block. Almost all of us in this church have gone through difficult moments, have gone through difficult times. Most of us in this church have been tempted to give up, have been tempted to throw the towel. Some of us in this church have been accused wrongly. Some of us in this church come from families, from relationships, from situations where we feel unloved, unappreciated, unaccepted. But there are basic things that I think are important for all of us. The first one, don't feel sorry for yourself. I need to learn to rise above the situation I need to acknowledge what is going on, but instead of allowing the outside world to change who I am, I need to work with the outside world in order to achieve my dream. What does one need to do when one is drowning? Do you paddle and fight against it? The best thing to do is to relax, let go, and float. And so the person who's coming to help you out is unable to help you if you two are fighting, because both of you eventually will drown. But when I relax and let go and trust, the other person is able to swim with me out of danger. And the same, I believe, applies in our lives, in our situations. There comes a time in our lives when we need to say, I have done all that is humanly possible. Now I need to trust God. It's easier said than done, but I need to train myself and say, Lord, I leave this to you. There's also something absolutely amazing. Joseph is betrayed by his own, and they think they are done with him. But eventually Joseph ends up in Egypt. You know the Joseph narrative, how he ends up in the house of Potiphar. You know how he's accused of rape. You know how he's in prison. But all these events, all these things that are happening, are there in order to shape Joseph's destiny. Because it's only while he is in prison that they discover his greatest gifts. And you may be going through the darkness of the night. You may be going through the wilderness. You may be going through a very rough patch in your life. But there's always an important question. Lord, what are you doing with my life? What is it that you are teaching me? What is it that you want me to know and to understand? Today we celebrate the birthday of Archbishop Ngcobo. He was with us in this Archdiocese of Durban for 2 years. And in these 2 years, he was not the diocesan bishop. Now you take a man who was the CEO of a company and you bring him into a new company, but you don't make him a CEO. You tell him that I'm moving you there because you will become a CEO. But he sits and he observes for 2 years. That will drive me nuts. It will drive quite a number of people nuts. And so you ask yourself, having been in Kimberley for 8 years as a bishop, why then now will he be here for the last 2 years and only die without taking over the scene in Durban? Sometimes God's thinking are not ours. But there is a solution, or there is a sense of comfort for some of us. Is that the Lord was able to take Archbishop Ngcobo from Kimberley, and he brought him in here to know, to learn, to study, and to know us. As he visited this parish, he visited many other parishes. And now we can say to God, there's someone with God who knows us personally. And so in him, yes, we have lost an archbishop, but we've gained a saint, an ancestor, the one who's able to pray with us and for us. And he died as our father. And no father, in his good sense, forget his children. There's another thing that I also find absolutely amazing in this reading. Along the way, they got impatient. And more often than ever, when we get impatient, we tend to blame other people. And so too with these people. They became impatient with themselves. They became impatient with God. They became impatient with Moses, and they started to blame someone else. And they blame it on Moses and on God. Why did you take us out of Egypt to make us come here to die? Why did you save me in order for me to come here and live a miserable life? Let's look into our own lives. Do I have the tendency of blaming everybody else for the things that are not going well in my life? Am I too quick to blame someone rather than to take ownership and say, I messed up, I was wrong, I should change? Now, what seems to interest me is that as they blame it on God, God seems to be hurtful. He says, I'm done with you. And he sends serpents. Now we are too Sunday. Because it doesn't mean God can get hurtful, lack of a better word. How often do I complain? I sometimes hear people say, oh, my life is so bad, things are not going well, I haven't been working, I haven't been getting this, I haven't been doing this, and they blame it on God. They said, things have not been going well, things have not been progressing for the past 10 years, or for the past 5 years, or for the past couple of months. And I'm like saying to myself, that's probably true. But you've got eyes. How many people are blind? I've got legs. How many people cannot walk? I can understand how many people are bedridden. And for me, there is a great appreciation of life that is lacking. I may not have everything that I want, but I have everything that I need. The gift of life. And so I think one of the things that the Lord is teaching us here is the sense of appreciation of life, and to learn to appreciate that which we have, and to learn to go back to God with gratitude. But there's something that also happens when they realize that they are dying because of these snakes. They then go back to Moses and they say to him, you know what, we think we've done wrong, and please go and ask the Lord to forgive us. And I think there's a lesson there. Do I have the ability, having realized that I was the one in the wrong, do I have the ability to go back and say, I'm sorry? Do I have the ability to swallow my pride and acknowledge the wrong that I've done? I find it absolutely amazing that God, at the end of it all, is able to listen to Moses. That Moses, who was insulted, is able to go back to God and say, Lord, they made a mistake. Yes, I'm upset. Yes, I'm angry, but they made a mistake. And God changes his mind and is able to heal, to forgive, and to give them another chance. May the Virgin Mother of God continue to be with us, to protect, to bless, and to guide us, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.